So Parshat Vayeshev, some interesting pieces that I want to learn with you. So we'll start off with the Emes Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, and he brings a famous Rashi, and really he wants to know what's bothering Rashi. In many cases, that's when Rashi gives you an interpretation. Something is bothering him. There's something out of whack. So the Torah says that he loved Yosef because he was ki ben zekunim hulo, right? He was his ben zekunim. He was his baby son, right? Rashi doesn't say that. Pirush Rashi, v'unkelis targum. He brings unkelis, the targum of unkelis. Now you have to know the targumim are perushim. We're going to see that in the next piece. I want to go through with you a little bit to show you something very special about how the Targum changes when the meaning changes. But the Targum says, Ari bar Hakim hule. He was his why did he, what's pshat that he, ben zekunim, like a zakein, zeh shekana chachma, is a word that's used for a Talmud Chacham. So he loved him because he was a Chacham, right? How so? Kol ma shelamad mishem ve'ever masar lo, that he took Yosef because of his extraordinary intellectual capabilities for learning. He taught him not only the regular Torah that he gave all the other Shvatim, but he taught him the Torah that he learned. Remember, he was 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem ve'ever, which in itself is a pella, right? He took off and went 14 years to study in Shem. He was already 60 years old, right? He had been learning with his grandfather. He learned with his father. All of a sudden, he went and took a detour and learned for 14 years. I mean, enough, go to work, right? So, but he taught him everything he learned, what was unique about Shem ve'ever, Masalo, Pirush Devorav. What does that mean? Shayakashalo, what bothered him is Hayalo, hello, Ein Yosef haben Zekunim Mamish. So but the point is this, by the way, that's another story about what the Torah of Shem ve'ever was a totally different Torah. It was a Torah of survival in Golus, right? The other brothers didn't need that. Yosef needed that because he was going to take us into Golus, so he had to learn the Torah of Shem ve'ever, how to survive, not in your ivory tower, but how to live in the world, right? Okay, but we're not going there. He discussed that in another parsha. Someday we'll do that. But what was bothering Rashi that he came up with this pshat? Ben Zekunim, Shahaya Kashalo, hello, Ein Yosef Ben Zekunim Mamash. He was not the youngest son. Ela Binyamin. Binyamin was the youngest son. So, that's what's bothering Rashi, right? Ulekach Pirush, so therefore he has a different Pirush. The Kavana he al Chachmato shel Yosef, the Chachma of Yosef. Ubeemes, Bezeh Gufa notes, now it makes sense, Masharo, now we understand, Masharo Echav, Ki oto ahav aviyah mikol achav. Now that it was bothering them, that he was favoring Yosef more than the other sons. The Bishlama, ilu haya be'emet ben zekunim, if he was the baby, wouldn't bother them, right? Wouldn't bother them. Lo hayu mekanim bo kol ikar, they wouldn't be jealous. Dechein hu darko shel olam. This is the way it goes. Sha'av ho te'ohev yoter et ha'yanuka shelo. Right, the little baby is always the favorite, right? So aval kivan shehu lo haya ben zekunim, but since he was not the ben zekunim, v'aval pikein chivu aviv, and their father still was more attached to him. Yoter mikula, more than the rest of them, mishum shebar chakimhu. So that's the pshat. That was the different pshat. That's what it means. Miyad nitkanubo. So they were jealous. He's getting this extra attention and learning, this extra leadership development. Udichtiv, and the pasuk says, "Vayiru echav ki oto ahav avihem mikol achav." The brothers saw that he loved him more than them. Vayisnu oto, and they hated him. Amnam. However, Mashahosiv Rashi, Kol Masha Lamad B'Shem Ve'ever Masarlo. This idea that he taught him. Actually, he's going to say it here. This is what he's going to say now. So what was the Yesh L'Daktek Madua Dafka et Torah Shem Ve'ever Masarlo? So I really gave it away. Why Dafka? What was unique about the Torah of Shem Ve'ever? V'halo Yaakov lamad gam etzel Avraham zikno v'Yitzchak aviv. Yaakov learned by his father, he learned by his grandfather. V'chilo hayalo Torah avot limsor lo. There was plenty to give over to Yosef. Gam tzarich levayer. We have to understand. V'chilo masar Yaakov l'shar banav et Torah toshalamet. He didn't give this over to Yaakov, to the other brothers. He only gave it over to Yosef, right? So basically, he's going to say what we said. I explained this somewhere else in Parshat Vayeshev. The HaTorah shel Shem ve'ever hayta Torah miyuchedet. It was unique Torah. Torah HaGalut was the Torah of Golus, living in the diaspora. Ki rak Shem ve'ever, only Shem ve'ever, shechayu b'doram shel rishoyim gemurim, who lived in a generation of thoroughly evil people. V'aval pikein hitzlichu, but nonetheless they were successful spiritually. Lishaer b'tzikatam, to remain in their piety. Haim elu sheyachol limsor liYaakov. They were the ones that could give over to Yaakov. Eich lachyot etzel Lavan harasha. Yaakov had to learn how to live with Lavan, right? 20 years. V'lo lilmod b'maasav harayim, and not to learn from Lavan's evil ways. The Torah Avot lo hispika lezeh. The Torah of the Avot was not enough for that. Ki Avot hayu zekenim v'yoshim b'yeshiva v'lo hushbu klal mehashpat svivatam. They were not influenced from the environment. It was pure Torah, right? Ulechein mikivan shekibla shekabola haya biyadam mipi Avraham. They had a Kabbalah tradition from Avraham. Shetzrichim heim adayin lachyot ba'eretz lo lehem, that they were going to live in Mitzrayim. Va'avadum, and they would be made to serve. Ve'inu otam, they oppressed them. Halot tzarech Yaakov lahachin et banav legalot zu. Yaakov had to prepare his children for this galus. Umatzinu she'amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'Avram, and in fact, this message was given over to Avram by the Brit Bein Abtarim, the Brit Bein Abtarim, the famous covenant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made with Avram. You know that you're going to be a stranger. Why did he have to know this? Oh dear, he told him. They had to prepare themselves for this unfortunate turn of events, this necessary turn of events in Jewish history. Since Yosef was the one who was in the real thick of it, he had to stand alone. Neged kol hanisyonot shamdu, he was all alone in Mitzrayim. V'hu zeh she'alav nafal ha'ol, upon him fell the yoke, lahachin et hamakom livnei Yaakov, to prepare the place, Mitzrayim, Goshen, le'reid leMitzrayim, for them to come down to Mitzrayim. Yaakov muchrach limsor dafka lo et haTorah hamiyuchedet azot. So therefore, Yaakov had to dafka necessarily give it specifically to Yosef, right? Torah Argalut, Torah Shem Ve'ever, the Torah of Shem Ve'ever. Amnam Achim, the tribes, Shiftei Korah, the Shvatim, Shelo Yadu et Hasiba Madua Lomed Yaakov im Yosef. They didn't know the reason why Yaakov was teaching Yosef this extra curricular Torah, right? Yoter Torah me'asher lamad itam, nitkanu bo v'radfu. So therefore they were mekanim, they were jealous, and they were wrote of him. Dahare bevrit ben abetarim, between the bris ben abesarim, nemar gamkein sha'acharei kein yatzu b'rechush gadol. They're going to come out with great wealth from Egypt. But he says, V'hainu kabos haTorah b'Har Sinai. But what the great wealth means, they're going to head to Har Sinai and receive the Torah. Ulechein kisharau sheYaakov lomeid im Yosef. They knew that the Torah was coming. They knew the bris with Avraham Avinu. They knew the Torah was coming. So therefore, when they saw that Yaakov lomeid im Yosef, chashvu sherak hu yizkeh lekabbalat Torah. Maybe only Yosef is going to have the merit of Kabbalas HaTorah, not the rest of them. It's going to be a private affair, just like he had these private lessons with his father. He's going to receive the Torah, right? Aval ha'emet, but the truth is, Dilehem he speaketh TORAH Avot. They had the TORAH Avot. V'rak Yosef hutzroch l'Torah Shem ve'ever. That's really the reason why this is all about, right? Okay, very special idea from Rabbi Yaakov. Now, let's go over the page to number 2. This is from the Ksav Kabbalah. Now, the Ksav Kabbalah was, we've seen him in past Parshat. The Ksav Kabbalah was Yehuda Mecklenburg. He was an unusual, the Ksav Kabbalah is an unusual work. The idea that he was dealing with the Bible scholars. So he created a work which combined Torah Shebichtav and Torah Shebal Peh to show the nexus between Torah Shebichtav. You can't go in a certain direction with the Torah Shebichtav without Torah Shebal Peh. And he put the two together. And there's enormous chidushim here, particularly in Pshat. In just Pshat, in the words of the Torah, that you see the Torah Shebal Peh in the words of the Torah, and in the words of the Targum also, as like we pointed out within the last piece, that he's going to show you here that one word in Hebrew could be translated in the Targum in different places 2 different ways. And that's what he's going to show you here. Okay, so let's see what he says. V'lo yachlo daber l'shalom, right? Dibro l'shalom, right? The brothers could not speak, at the beginning of the parsha, they couldn't speak to him b'shalom, right? Lo yachlu, they couldn't, lo yachlu, that's the word he's going to deal with. Lo yachlu, they couldn't, dibro, speak to him, l'shalom, peacefully. And the Targum usually the Targum translates yachol as yachol. But the Targum translated here is a different word, savan. Savan means something else. Savan means they didn't want to, right? So let's see what the difference is. V'lo yachlu, right? Yesh nimna min hadibur bisibat chisaron hayacholet v'hakoach. They couldn't speak to him. Why couldn't they speak to him? Right? Usually, yachol means, in general, lo yachol, you didn't have the strength. Lo yachol, any yachol, I just can't do it. But there's also lo yachol. Not I'm not able to do it. Lo yachol, I didn't want to do it. I don't want to do it. According to the Torah, that's that's what he's saying here. That's another translation of the word yachol. So what does it mean that they didn't want to do it, right? What's pshat? Were they rishoyim? No, on the contrary. V'lo yachlu achav la'anoroto v'yesh nimna misibat hamusar v'hamitzvah. In other words, there's 2 reasons. Either it's lo yachlu can be that I didn't do it because I'm not able, or I didn't do it because for some religious reason, some spiritual reason, I didn't want to do it. I want to resist it because you're not supposed to do it. Lo yechulin hamitzrim lechol. This is another pasuk. He's just bringing an example. V'lo yachlu la'asod at Pesach, for example. They couldn't eat what's that parsha with the Pesach Sheni. The Jews who were tamei, and they couldn't share in the Pesach Sheni, so they came to Moshe, help us. Lo yachlu la'asod Pesach. They couldn't eat the Korban Pesach. Why couldn't they eat the Korban Pesach? They couldn't. They weren't allowed to. They didn't want to because they were tamei. So you got to help us, right? Parshat Ba'alocha. V'chein yesh lefarsha be'echad mishnei panim ha'elu. So lo yachlu can be either they didn't want to or they weren't able to, right? If the reason is that I can't do it, I don't do it, shemigodel sinatam oto, because they hate him, right? Hayalahem bilti efshari l'daber imo divrei shalom. They couldn't speak to him, right? They couldn't speak to him words of shalom, right? But but they just couldn't, I don't have the strength to do it. I don't want to do it, right? But here, in mesibat hamusar v'hamitzvah, but if there's a spiritual reason, Why? Shelo hayu rotzim, and Rashi says this, right? Shelo hayu rotzim liot min hakat. They didn't want to be from the people hadovrim bepiem shalom imreim vera bilavavam. They didn't want to be echad bepeh ve'echad belev. They were honest. Lo yachlu dabro b'shalom, because they couldn't be hypocrites. They felt they were tzaddikim. They paskin that he was deserving of death. He was wrong or whatever. We're not going to get in there, but they paskin that he's no good, and he's excluding us, and it's wrong. But they couldn't speak to him b'shalom, because that would be fraud. They'd be faking. They'd be phony. They'd be speaking him kindly, and that they couldn't do that, right? That's why it says savan, v'lo yachlu dibro shalom, right? Is savan. They didn't want to, right? Not they couldn't. They didn't want to. Shalom Esra'im. V'zeh dat razal. This is what the rabbis say, Shodianu, when they tell us v'zeh shivcham, that the rabbis say it. It's a Gemara Rashi quotes. This is the shvacham of the Avos. Shelo dibru achat bepeh v'achat belev. They couldn't speak, say one thing and think another thing, right? Lekavana zu shinu hametargamim unklos v'yonos and Ben Uzil, the two targumim, changed the translation letargem velot savon, which is an Aramaic word for they didn't want, right? Lahaktin sinatam. This de-emphasizes their hatred. It's not about their hatred, right? Shelo nimnu midivrei shalom misibat godel hasina. They did not speak to him because they hated him. Rak misibat ratzon nafsham, because of their neshama. This was a panemiistic thing. This was an internal thing, right? What he refers to as musar, right? It was their internal. It was an internal thing. Lebal yavru al chok hamusar, not to go against this spiritual idea, this concept. Libli karevela befiyam belibam yirachu mimenu, to speak, one way and think the other way, right? V'yira. So, but you have another example. Well, I'll show you in a minute. But how do we know that? How do you know the difference? Where do you see the difference in the words of the Torah? In other words, where does Onkelos come to discover this different translation, right? And therefore change the translation. What is the giveaway in the words of the Chumash itself? V'yirish apirish ha'metargamim milat yachlu inyan chayfetz v'ratzon. The targum, the milah, it could be that they want, they desire, or they don't want. For example, the word he says vayachal does mean I really want to do it. And he quotes for vatechal David HaMelech. This is in the end of Shmuel, Perek Yud Gimel and Shmuel Beit, that he pined for Avshalom, right? He wanted him, Yachol, right? Ukemoshe Tirgim Yerushalmi Vayachol Echabiyam Ashvi. He's giving other. We don't need all the examples. Skip to the next line. Va'af shemistaver yoter lefaresh v'lo yachlu lignutam. Even though, if you look at this, if you look at the pasuk without this, I would if I would ask for a raising of hands without this, without seeing Rashi and just reading the words of the pasuk, you would say they couldn't speak to him because they hated him, right? That's what we would say, right? They're going to kill him. They wanted to kill him. Mikol makom, but that was notwithstanding. The rabbis wanted to explain this to their credit. They just couldn't do it, right? They didn't want to do it. Nearly, now how do you get this? How do they see this in the words of the Chumash? Okay, nearly shiyotzlahen b'milat dibro, right? Usually you have diber ito, the verb and the pronoun. Usually the verb and the pronoun are separated, right? But sometimes the verb and the pronoun rarely are put together, right? So that's what he wants to say here. When the verb and the pronoun are put together, there's a synthesis. There's something pnimiut. There's something internal at play here. It's not external. Dibru oto, ito, to speak to him, right? Nothing emotional. But diber ito, but dibro, where you're putting the two together, there's something much more. There's something deeper there. That's what he's saying, right? So So he says, "V'nira li sheyotza lehen kain." How did this come out? B'milat dibro, to speak to him. B'hitchavrut hakinui ve'alapol, to take the pronoun with the verb, is put in one word. V'lo amar diber imo. Didn't say spoke to him, separate words, but b'milat hakinui b'fnei atzmo, that the pronoun is separate, right? Ki hevdel bein l'zel, there's a tremendous difference. Shebemilat hakinui yora ala prat dafka, right? When you separate the two, you're focusing on, I just can't speak to him, me, two separate things. Ubihit chavrut hakinui elapol. But when you put together the person, the pronoun, the object, and the verb, put it together, skip down to the next line, in the middle of the next line, then it's something else. He gives other examples, but I want to go to the next one. V'im haita kavanat, so it's something very different. V'im haita kavanat hamikra, if the Torah really wanted to tell us, lahodianu shemisibat godel hasina, because he hated them, they hated him. Nimnu midibrei shalom hayaroi lomar diber imo. They would have said diber imo. You and me, I have nothing to do with you. Lahorot al haprati. That's it. That's the point. Umida amar dibro, that they didn't want to speak to him in one word. Yora al korchach. By perforce we say lichlol, to include. She bechola inyanehem. Everything they did, hayu mitnahagim b'mida tova. They meant well, right? V'yir Hashem, pirish dibru l'shalom. It was all because they didn't want to sacrifice their piety, right? Kasher haya Yosef noten lehem shalom. For example, I was going to give you two other examples here that you see just the opposite. Next week, when we could have done this piece next week also. When Yosef, he's with the brothers and he can't take it anymore. He runs out of the room, right? He ran out of the room, Yosef, right? What does the pasuk say, right? Haya Yosef noten lehem shalom lo yachlu ha'achim. So once he revealed himself, right? It says lo yachlu ha'achim lizbol v'lishmo dvarav ki af haya margish b'sinatam hayarodef achar shalom. So I forget the exact lotion of the psukim over there, but if you look at in Vayigash, you'll see. I'm sorry, I don't have the chumash here. So, but you'd see that it separates. It separates that he had when he couldn't speak to them. He couldn't speak to them, but it was separate. It's not one word. It's two words, right? And when the brothers were nishtomen, when they couldn't, their response was also separate. It was a separate thing, right? They just couldn't. They couldn't. He couldn't do it, and they couldn't do it, right? Okay. One example. Another example I'll give you. When last week when Esav kissed Yaakov, right? Vayishakehu. One word, not Vayishak oto. Vayishakehu. What does Rashi say there? He was motivated with real rachamim. He really felt there was a moment of love that Esav actually felt for Yaakov. So Vayishakehu, it's one word. This is the Ksava Kabbalah. The dots on top, right? Yeah. Right. There's another. So he changed his tune, I guess. Right. Okay. How do you explain that pshat? Maybe he wanted to, but he didn't. Lamaisa, he didn't. Okay. Good. Okay. The third and final offering for the day is from the Shemi Shmuel. Okay, the bottom of page 2, and over the page. I know it looks wordy. It's as Rabbi Isaac Bernstein's Zatzal used to say when he gave shiurim, it's long, but it's not long-winded. Okay, he would say about the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, it's long, but it's not long-winded. So it moves. So the Shemi Shmuel gets at the beginning of the parsha. Why did they hate him? Right? What was the whole business here? Because of the dreams, right? So you see that there's a tremendous strained relationship between the Shvatim and Yosef because of his dreams. And in the first dream, So he's going to talk about something in the first dream. V'hinei kama alumati v'gam nitzava. He said, you know, you were all standing around me, and my sheaves of grain, and my sheaf was v'hinei kama rose up, v'gam nitzava, and it stayed there. It stayed in the standing position, right? So that's what he wants. So he quotes one of the great Hasidic masters, the Koshitzer Magid, right? In the Pasuk in Tehillim, he says, what does it say? That it rose and it stayed up, right? So the Koshitzer Magid Pasuk in Tehillim, Mi ya'aleh b'har Hashem, who's going to go up to the Har Hashem? Umi yakum bimkom kachon, who's going to stay there, right? It's one thing to have a moment of inspiration, right? To elevate yourself spiritually, but to maintain that level, that's the real challenge. So there's a dual message here in spirituality, and here there's a dual message here in his dream that not only I'm in the middle, I'm standing up, but I'm going to maintain this position against you of leadership, right? That's what they saw. Miyala, right? Shehem shnei dvarim. There's a dichotomy here, two things. Shafilu shekvar ola b'har Hashem, in the pasuk, even though a person got up to Har Hashem, mihu asher yelo l'shama amida v'kiyum shelo yipol mimalato, that you have to stay up on the mountain and don't fall down. That's the Koshas Hamagid. The Nira, based on that interpretation, the me'achar shehachomer v'haguf hubal shinui utmura. Our physicality is we're made up of neshama and guf. The guf is very wishy-washy, right? The guf we live with all of the material things around us and our taivas, and the body is weak. Al kain tamid chalifot v'tzavayimo. So we vacillate our body because we're human. We're human. Aval ish seichel, myself. But a person who has seichel, a person who has spirituality, myself heim bekoach nishmato. He acts based on his neshama, right? His neshama is in charge of his body, not his body in charge of himself, but the neshama is working out, right? That's the other element. Kidi Isi, over the page. The Zohar HaKodesh, he quotes from the Zohar. Kol ma shetimtza lasot bekochacha asay bekocha da nishmata de barnash. So it refers to the nishmata de barnash. When a person does the right thing, it's his neshama that's working. The kfar amarnu shapirishu sha'osa bechiyut ubihit lahavut, with life. The neshama is our life. It's with life, chiyut, and hit lahavut, and passion, right? B'chol kocho b'chavanato, with all his power and his kavanah. Me'orer koach haneshama shebo. So that comes from the neshama. When we do the right thing physically, it's the neshama is talking to us. Sometimes, you make a decision to do something and it's the right thing, and it's the neshama talking, So, Kimosha neshama einenu balat shinui, because the neshama doesn't change. The neshama does not change. U'tamura, there's no change. Shaharehi me'elyonim, the neshama comes from the perfect world of the heavens. V'chein lemaisa, yesh kiyum v'amida. So you have two things. You have kiyum and you have amida, right? So amida is physically, I have the power to stand up. I have the power to climb a mountain. I have the power to do something. But the kiyum, to keep it going, that has to come from the neshama. V'yesh remel zeb medrash, and he brings a. So that's what was going on here, right? What was our original point? Why does it say that Yosef told, and that was the two things that bothered them about the dream. Not only is he standing up, he's superior over you, but he's staying there. You're gonna. What happens to you're gonna rot, right? The wheat doesn't stay, right? I'm gonna stay, right? So he brings an example of Medrash. It's actually a Gemara. He quotes from the Medrash Rabbah. Sheshol Antoninus es Rabbeinu. You know that Rebbe and Antoninus were very close friends. Rabbeinu HaKodesh, right, the author of the Mishnah, and Antoninus, The Greek king was they were very ruler, the Roman ruler, they were very close, right? So, and he was a brilliant person, Antoninus. He studied with Rabbi, right? So, and Antoninus asked Rabbi, "Me'ematai neshama nitna ba'adam." When does Hashem give the soul to man, right? Mishayotza mimeimo, when the baby's born, or ad shelo yitzeh, or when it's still inside, right? Amarlo. So Rabbi answered him, "L'kashayetze mimeimo." Rabbi says, when the neshama is when you leave the body. Amarlo love. Antoninus says, "You're wrong. You're wrong." But Marshal, I will give you a marshal. Im taniach basar gimel yamim below melach. If you leave meat 3 days without salt, or for us, and not in the refrigerator, right? Miyad hu masriach, right? It rots, right? That's the neshama, without the body without the neshama, right? So once the infant for 9 months is going to be without the neshama, cannot be, right? In fact, we say, so there's the guests. When people are excited when guests come, but after the third day already, okay, you get the picture. So, but here he's saying that's the pshat. So it's impossible for 9 months there should be a neshama. Amar lo mishiyotzi b'me'imo. No, so he says no, right? V'hu remez upela al ma'aseh adam, and this is a hint to the wonder of man, this symbiotic relationship of neshama and guf. Ma'aseh adam she'im ein behem koach haneshama ein lo kiyum. If there's no neshama, there's no kiyum. You're dead meat, right? You're dead meat, right? V'hine madregat Yosef hu hai ki chai kidua, and Yosef was chai. The Kabbalists speak about Yosef as chai. He was the fulfillment of life. He was. That's what he was. If you think about it, just on our simple level, he provided life to Egypt. He provided the world. He was chai. He was life. Yosef was the persona of life. He gave life to the entire world. He dispensed food to the entire world from Egypt. He brought Klal Yisrael together to come back into Mitzrayim and so on. So he was chai. So it makes sense what the Kabbalists call him chai, right? Behind what's chai is that synthesis of guf and neshama, right? Hainu shekol ma'asav haya tamid b'chiyut nifla. Everything he did was completely full of life. Al kain, therefore, somebody's phone. No problem. Okay. Al kain haya merkava lemide hayi. This is what we're saying here. Al kain hayu lemaisav amida v'kiyum. So therefore, Yosef had both amida and kiyum. He stood up, right? And amida, and it was mekayim. He kept it. It was consistent. He was constant and consistent, right? V'zeh kama alumati. That's my aluma will stand up. V'gam nitzava, and it will remain fresh. Shenisharet al amda. It'll stay where it is. V'zeu pirish Rashi. V'Yosef hayab Mitzrayim. That Yosef was in Mitzrayim. What does this tell us? That he was in Mitzrayim, right? In other words, there's a famous. There was a famous. Napoleon's rabbi was Rav Yosef David Sinsheim. He was the head of Napoleon. If you know the history, Napoleon made a Sanhedrin, and he appointed this rabbi Sinsheim to be the head of the Sanhedrin, right? So everybody thought it was he was a Rav Mitam, some chief rabbi. He doesn't know anything, They say the bigger the shul, the bigger the amoritz the rabbi is. He has a little shtibel. He's a big Talmud Chacham, right? So people thought that the chief rabbi, this so-called chief rabbi of the Sun, was an amoritz. When he died, the fact of the matter is he was a tremendous gadol b'Torah. He wrote a sefer on Psachim that is used today in all yeshivas when you learn Masechta Psachim. But the Chassam Sofer eulogized him. He died in Parshat Miketz. And in Parshat Miketz, he quoted from Parshat Miketz that he tells him, go down to my, Vayigash rather. He died in Vayigash. So in the drushes of Chassam Sofer, he says, and this was his hesped for him. He said, when you go down to my father, tell him I'm the president in Egypt, right? So he says, what's that all about? Yosef wanted to tell Yaakov that he was the president. You know, my son, the president, right? Right? You know the old joke, right? You know, everybody knows the joke, right? The Jewish president. You know that joke? The Jewish president and his mother comes. And she's sitting there by the inauguration, and they're telling her, "Oh, you're such a special lady, Mrs. Goldberg. Your son's the president." Yeah, but my other son's a doctor, right? So the Chassam Sofer writes here, just getting back to this, he says, what was he telling Yaakov? He's telling Yaakov that Yosef is telling his father, "I'm Yosef, and I'm president of Mitzrayim, whatever I'm, the viceroy of Mitzrayim, Mishnah Melech, but I'm still Yosef. It didn't affect me." That was the message he was giving to his father, right? And that's what he says here. Pirush Shema Vayosef haya b'Mitzrayim la'odicha shetzidkato shel Yosef hu Yosef haro ratzon aviv. He's the same Yosef in the head of sitting in the palace in Egypt. He's the same Yosef who was haro ratzon aviv, who was the shepherd for his father. Who Yosef shaya b'Mitzrayim v'nasa melech va'omed b'tzidko. He maintained his level of piety because Yosef was chai. In fact, many times Sephardim have the name Yosef Chai. Anybody know people named Yosef Chai? It's a name that Sephardim give. Where did that come from? Where does the name Yosef Chai come from? It comes from the Zohar. It's this idea that Yosef was with the midah of Chai. So you have Yosef Chai, right? Okay. V'zeh she'ita b'medrash, and he gives an example, another medrash. Atem konsim perot, says you collect your fruit. V'ani kones perot. You farm your fruit, and I'll farm my fruit. Shalachem rakuvim v'shaliyomdim. Your fruit is going to rot. If you don't come with me, that's was the dream. If you don't come with me, if you don't follow me, you're going to go your own way. You're going in the wrong direction. If you come with me, your fruit will be maintained, because every one of the Shvatim had something very special. So if you join together with where I'm going, where the Rebbeinu Shalom is taking me, your fruit will also be omed. V'hainu shekol ma shahayta avodatam b'chiyut hurak mipat Yosef. If whatever the Shvatim are going to do is with life, it's because of the power of Yosef. Shehu haya mashpia midazu l'kulam. He gave over this idea. He was the cutting edge of spirituality, Yosef, right? Kol's manchahu kasher haya b'telim elav. Okay. V'zehu, and that's the pshat here. Hinei tisu bena alumotechem your v'tishtachavena lu'ulamati. That's the pshat. The Medrash says that's the pshat in the pasuk, that your sheaves are going to bow down to me. Everyone's going to bow down to me, right? Aval keshemachru, when they sold him, chasera lehem midazu. So they separated themselves from the neshama of Klal Yisrael. They separated themselves from the lifeline of them. Yosef went into Mitzrayim and left them alone. They didn't have that neshama. They didn't have that chiyus, right? Al kain, keshe atzru, al kain. Where am I? Keshe machru, al kain. Adkan. That's the Medrash. So this makes sense. That's why all the trouble happened, right, to them. They were without Yosef, right? And they had to go search for Yosef. They were searching for Yosef, was searching for the bringing together that fulfillment again of Klal Yisrael, Yosef joining Klal Yisrael, the necessity of their coming together. Okay? Kisha'asru perot kodem harav. So this is the idea, he says, the Shem Yishmael brilliantly. This is the idea. Kisha'asru perot kodem harav. He collected all the perot. Before the famine, Yosef collected all the fruit, right? He had all the fruit. Yosef had the fruit, right? Kodem harav nirkavu v'hutzruchu l'redet l'Mitzrayim. So their fruit rotted by the Shvatim in Eretz Yisrael. Peiros Eretz Yisrael, right? They rotted. He had to come to Egypt, had to come to Yosef, right? Because Yosef's Peirot were Mikuyam, right? So they had Hutzruchu l'redet l'Mitzrayim lishbor ochel. Had to come to Yosef to get their food. V'hine kain nemar. So that's his idea. Now he says a kind of we have a few minutes? Yeah, we have a few minutes. So he has a kind of PS here. The last paragraph is a mistake. I took too much out on from this piece. But this piece, he compares this to Shabbos. He says this is what Shabbos is, right? He says, "Vehine kein nemar Shabbat, shehu yuma denishmata." Shabbos is called the day of the neshama. In other words, 6 days of the week. That's like guf, right? We take care of our physical business, but Shabbos is neshama. But the goal is to put Shabbos into the weekday, right? So he says, shehu yuma denishmata sheish zocheh hazocheh lekabel Shabbat. The person who is merits keeping Shabbos, right? Keroi properly, yesh lo amidah v'kiyum. He'll have amidah, right? It elevates him spiritually, but kiyum, he'll keep it, right? Kemoshe zocher Shabbat kol yemei achol. Remember on the Shabbos every day of the week. Ubatelim kol yemei achol Shabbat, and all the days of the week are bottled to Shabbos. That's why we say, right? The Ramban tells us, we don't have names for the days of the week, right? It's Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi. What's that all about? Yom Rishon, say in the morning at the Shul Yom. Yom Rishon l'Shabbat. Right? Now, by the way, it works both ways. It's the past Shabbos and the next Shabbos. There's a kedusha to the past Shabbos and the next Shabbos. So Yom Rishon l'Shabbat that we left, and Yom Rishon is the first day towards the next Shabbos. You need the past because the past is Erev Shabbos. That's the preparation for Shabbos. So this is the first day of my preparation for Shabbos. I'm going, right? So you need, right? That's Erev Shabbos. That's all 6 days before. That's why Erev Shabbos is so hectic, right? It's so hectic. It's like, the Chofetz Chaim had a mashal about, you write a postcard. He said how this life goes by very quickly. So you go away and you remember postcards? We know what some of us know what postcards are. They don't exist anymore. So you're going away and you have to write a postcard to your family. You didn't write them, right? So you go into the store, you buy a postcard, and you start writing in big letters, "Dear Mommy and Daddy," right? And then you start thinking there's more to say. And you're writing, and it's getting smaller. Your writing is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because you're running out of space. You're running out of space, right? So that's Erev Shabbos, right? No matter even come at 4:30 comes, or 4:15, or if it comes at 7:30, we still run into that same problem, right? So, but that's why. Did you ever wonder why in Kiddush, what are the first two words of Kiddush? What are the first two words in Kiddush? Yom HaShishi. Yom HaShishi. Yom HaShishi. Yom HaShishi is the first words of Kiddush for Shabbos. What's that all about? And the sixth day, we don't say the whole pasuk, right? Vayer, Vayivoker, we just quietly. Yom HaShishi. Vayechul HaShemayim V'Haaretz. What's that all about? Because that is the Shabbos. It's all Shabbos. Everything is Shabbos. That's the kiyum of Shabbos. That is right. We're Amida. We're Omed b'Shabbat. Physically, we're in Shabbos, right, on the seventh day. But it's really the whole week. That's why, by the way, also that you say in Friday night in Magen Avot, you say twice Shabbat and Yom HaShvi. There's a repetition, a redundancy in the tefillah in Magen Avos Friday night. Why is there two? What do you say Shabbos and Yom HaShvi? Because they're two separate things, right? Shabbos is, that's it. That's the Amidah. That's it. The Kedusha. We've arrived. It's our point of arrival. And the Yom HaShvi means it's the journey to the arrival, right? So you need both. You need the journey and the arrival, right? Okay. So, pleasure.